Look at this sexy guy. His arms are 15 foot long and they grab you. This is what's called a Boneclaw, and it is quite possibly my favorite monster to use for a few reasons which you're about to find out. Hello, it's Magical Tea Party. I'm your host, Jake Anslow, and this is what you call a Boneclaw. This is the first episode of a series where I'm going to be talking about the monsters of D&D. Starting with one that most of you probably don't have, because this is in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, page 121. This thing is CR 12, challenge rating 12, so for all the DMs, throw this at your level 12 party. Don't do that. Around level 8 or 7 if it's alone, around level 10 if it has a bunch of backup, because the CR ratings kind of become a bit harder to manage when you get around the 7 and 8 mark. Don't throw this at a high level party, because it's kind of hard to manage encounters later levels. But the Boneclaw looks like this. It has, like I said, 15 foot long arms, a very skeletal structure, which you could kind of infer, but weirdly you can see like a very prominent rib cage, and then below that, bone-like abs. The face itself has got kind of like a bunch of little bony spikes on the head. It like wears some gowns which you can easily just take off, and like a scarf. This thing is edgy. What makes it even more terrifying is that these long ass arms kind of have like, on the outside is a bunch of bones, and then it's kind of like stretching, and on the inside is all the flesh, which is kind of sticking out on some of the parts of the arms. It's reverse human anatomy. And finally, the big ass 2 foot, 3 foot long claws. This thing is a large creature. It's pretty terrifying. I picture it like 11, 12 feet tall, because that and the power to have the ability to just kind of snatch anyone with one claw and be able to sufficiently hold them, which is one of their key abilities, is very spooky. This is yet another undead, and there are a lot of undead in D&D, and this one is probably one of my favorites. AC of 16, which is kind of bad for the CR. HP average of 127, which is but it has some resistances that make up for it. So the resistances are cold, because it's a zombo, necrotic, because it's a zombo, and bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. And if you're throwing this at your level 7 to 8 party, at a minimum, they're going to have all ways of doing magic damage, so that is completely mitigated. Some ways that I've remedied this is perhaps bumping up the Boneclaw's health, because I don't think it's in flavor for them to be able to be taken down so easily. In terms of its conditional immunities, it's immune to all the good stuff that most undead are. Can't be charmed, exhausted, frightened, paralyzed, or poisoned. So the players might want to try something saucy out and be like, ooh, let's paralyze it, and then we get a round of advantage, and if it hits, everything's a crit. Nope. This thing is resistant to them, or immune even. Senses 60 feet of dark vision, kind of standard. And the languages, this is an undead that can speak, ladies and gentlemen. It speaks common and the main language of its master, which I'm going to go on to right now. So the way that a Boneclaw works is they are what happens when a great wizard undergoes a trial to become a lich and fails and becomes this mangled bone creature that can still talk and regains most of its intelligence, but gains a bunch of new weird stuff. For instance, it feels a yearning to go and find an evil master in someone who is perhaps an actual lich / someone on their way to becoming one. There's a lot of other stuff to it, but most of it you don't need to know other than this. The Boneclaw can have its entire past and a whole big backstory like a good old lich does. And for an early level party, this is bloody terrifying, because the first time my players encountered this on Sundays, it bursts out of a room, like two-shot the sorcerer, grabbed him and ran off, and did a bunch of necrotic damage to everyone else. And that's when everyone started being scared / hating him, because this thing's signature is its piercing claw attack. So +8 to hit, not amazing because the strength is only +4, and it has a 15 foot reach, which is another big signature thing about it. It does 3d10 +4 piercing damage, and if the target is a creature, it can pull it in and the target is grappled and can't use that claw to attack anyone else but them. But the Boneclaw is always going to probably try and have at least one person grappled, because that's one of their staples. They kind of snatch people up in the night. And they also have another action other than the multi-attack that allows them to pierce and claw twice, which is Shadow Jump, which only works if the Boneclaw is in dim light or darkness. So that's kind of a hint for him to work in the shadows. Anyone that the Boneclaw chooses within 5 feet of it, they need to make a con save, DC 14, not amazing, or they're going to take 5d12 plus 2 necrotic damage, which is a lot of necrotic. After using that, doing all the damage, it kind of bamfs 60 feet to like a space that it can see, and it can bring a creature that is grappling, and it also needs to go from dim light to darkness. So don't let the players fight this thing in dim light or darkness, or at least try and get them to do that. They're not going to want to do that if they fight it and then realize it can do all this shit in the dark. It also has a trait, Shadow Stealth, which some of you might know of. So while it's in dim light or darkness, it can take the hide action as a bonus action. It can kind of blend in. I guess this is what the whole black attire is for, somewhat melding into the environment a little better. Sure, man, you kind of stick out like a sore thumb. And it also has, not expertise, just proficiency in stealth, so a +7, and then also a +6 for perception, because Wizards of the Coast want most of their late level creatures to just be proficient in perception, so that rogues somewhat have a hard time sneaking up on some things, because otherwise it will be a walk in the park. They also have proficiency in dexterity, constitution, and wisdom saving throws, so constitution, dexterity, and wisdom being the 3 most popular saving throws that anyone has to make. It's kind of okay on the resistances front. It's hard to bring down. As a reaction that it has deadly reach, so if any visible enemy moves within its 15-foot reach, which is mental, it can do a piercing claw attack, and if it hits, can do it again, which is mental and kind of makes you scared to walk up to it, because otherwise it might get 1 or 2 attacks on you and also grapple you, which is mean. It's mean. But this isn't the main reason I like the Boneclaw. It's for its last trait, Rejuvenation. This is a trait very similar to the ones liches have, where if they have a phylactery, they will, after dying and waiting a d10 of days, revive next to this phylactery with all of their health and back to do business. A Boneclaw has something similar, except it doesn't really have a phylactery. Instead, when it makes a bond with its master and the master is living, if it dies, if it's destroyed, gets a new body in a d10 hours with all of its hit points within a mile of its master, which is one of the stupidest and most fun tricks I've ever pulled on the party, because they killed this thing like 3 times now and they're so annoyed with it. When you throw this guy to Paladin, late level, the Paladin's going to be able to 1v1 them, which is what mine can do. This thing has continued to be a nuisance because I keep using its Rejuvenation trait to just appear after a day once the party have killed it once again, and it will just turn up again, and they'll be like, oh, for fuck's sake, and then they kill it again relatively easily. And that's why I've kind of had to start making a few adjustments to it. So for instance, I gave it a little extra health, and I made its shadow jump deal a little extra damage, and the multi-attack for piercing claw have 3, and the piercing claw itself deal 4d10 plus 4. The to hit also went up to +9 because CR increases, because I do kind of like keeping recurring villains somewhat getting better along with the party. So this is an example of that. It's a good idea to use because this thing literally cannot die, and if you're using it as kind of like a minion for the big bad evil guy, then it can keep on showing up as much as you like, which is one of my favorite things to use about this, and I'm definitely reusing it at some point in another campaign. But for now, this little fuck exists to pain my Sunday game. Anyone who's watching from that game right now, I love you all, but I also like to sometimes see you get a bit mad. He's become a little underpowered because my party have all leveled up way beyond him. But when I could use him properly, he was actually a deadly force that the party was scared of for at least a little while. Thank you everyone for watching the first episode of this series where I'm talking about the monsters. Not sure what monster I'm doing next, but I have quite a few in my long list of things that I do want to talk about, because I am an extremely massive nerd. This has been Magical Tea Party. I'm Jake Anslow. Do the like and all the other stuff as well. You know, actually, I don't think many YouTubers do this, but there is also a dislike button that you can press, although I wouldn't recommend it, not gonna lie. It will give you a virus, and YouTube hasn't said anything about it, and I'd probably be on the safer side and avoid it. Thank you for watching, and use this. It's very good.